This is Solo in the Shop. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about some products that each of you could be making and how those could help your business become more profitable. Whether you are a hobbyist, weekend warrior, making commissions for friends and family, or already a full-time maker, if you are solo in your shop, this is the show for you. I'm Ronald Lowe's, the host of Solo in the Shop, a woodworking podcast discussing everything from current projects, tools and techniques, decisions around running a small business, and much more. So if you frequently find yourself alone and covered in sawdust, follow my journey and we can be solo in the shop together. Hello, my dusty friends. As I started thinking about today's topic, I went to ChatGPT and asked the question, what are 10 potential products that a solo woodworker could be making? And tell me about the difficulty, the material cost, the time involved, and the potential profit for each of those. Surprisingly, ChatGPT knows a lot about this and gave me quite the list. I was kind of disappointed, and spoiler alert, dining room tables not on the list. And I think the problem there, and the reason it didn't make the list, was that the cost of materials is very high. I typically spend over $1,000 on materials alone, and the weight involved makes building dining room tables difficult for solo woodworkers. I've worked around that by adding winches in the ceiling of my garage where I can clamp onto the table and lift it and spin it, move it around. But not everybody has that. So building heavy, 200, 300 pound tables is not always practical if you're a solo woodworker. Looking at the list, the first thing, and it's not going to be any surprise, is the cutting boards. Very low difficulty, low cost, a very short time to build unless you get into those crazy patterns, whether it's a weave or a crosshatch or bread baskets or, mosaics, chaos boards. So you can obviously add lots of complexity to your designs, and that adds to your final cost, but it definitely adds to the time to build. So the potential profit for cutting boards is moderate, and the reason it's moderate is you've got a low cost, but there's definitely a limit to how much people are willing to spend on cutting boards. There's also concerns around how you sell those. If you can get them on Etsy and get the right traction, that's a great outlet. I know I have tried selling cutting boards at farmers markets and gift shows and things like that with only mixed results. There are certain times of year, certainly cutting boards very popular at the holidays, but other than that, selling cutting boards one at a time can be challenging, I'll say. I did have a fair amount of success selling cutting boards to service providers like real estate agents who will give those away as housewarming gifts when they close on a house. That's a great way to sell 5, 10, 15 cutting boards at a time. So if you know somebody who's in real estate, ask around. The next item up is picture frames, and I would argue the cost is very low, but your skill needs to be very high, and you need good 90-degree clamping. That's kind of just find the right tools, but then once you've got the technique down, you can batch those out, right? It's easy to make some jigs and some stop blocks and crank out a bunch of pieces, different kinds of wood, but all kind of the same size, the same cut, get a rabbiting bit. And then depending on the wood species and any kind of decoration, whether you're adding some brass trim, things like that, adding details can increase the price when you sell it. Obviously, the more work you put into it, that's going to raise the cost, but it also raises the sale price. A very easy product, floating shelves. You can either make box shelves or you can make them out of thicker, like 4-inch thick, 3.5-inch thick slabs. So very popular right now. And again, Etsy is a great way to market those, get it onto your website, get it into your shop, and you can decide how much you want to spend on mounting hardware. There are very affordable options and there are very heavy duty options. Certainly, I got into making a floating mantle, and that thing was a beast, and the mounting hardware for it was very expensive. But that's not something where I wanted, a shelf to fall to the floor. They were putting more on there than some cups or books and things like that. So it really needed to hold the weight. So low cost, really usually pretty low skill, and a good market for those. ChatGPT also suggests making wooden coasters. Obviously, very low difficulty, low cost. You can use offcuts, and they can be built very quickly. Again, you need to have the market, whether it's Etsy or some craft fair or, again, realtors. Once I have identified some customers and can get a following, it is pretty high margin on coasters. On the flip side, the next one is jewelry boxes, and the potential profit on these is very high. However, to get top dollar, your skill needs to be also top dollar, top shelf, attention to detail, attention to your joinery, and to the finishing. So any kind of exotic woods, fine finish, great detail opens you up to the high-end market. So work up to it. It is more difficult depending on what kind of wood you're using. If you're using exotics and walnut, the material costs can be quite high, but there's a potential for a very high profit margin. Making signs, wall art. We've seen the mosaics, we've seen store signs. Certainly if you have either a Shaper Origin or a small CNC, cutting out letters becomes a little easier. Lower difficulty, I would say low to moderate difficulty, low to moderate time to build, but they can get very high prices. The other thing is there are not a lot of sign makers out there. So once you get known as somebody that can make signs, the snowball effect kicks in and lots of people need signs. It seems to be an almost constant market for signs. So I mentioned that dining tables are not on this list, but coffee tables are. To me, making a coffee table is exactly the same as making a dining table, except for the weight of the material involved and maybe the need for bracing with C-channels and things like that, just because the furniture can be smaller and a little wood movement isn't going to be as traumatic to the furniture. For a big coffee table, I would still support it, I suppose. But in order to make top dollar in coffee tables, again, your glue up skills, your finishing skills, your edge profiles, your joinery needs to be on point. And so it takes a little experience to get into table making. It seems like, oh, it's a piece of wood and some legs, but there's obviously a lot more to it, especially if you get the customers who are very specific about what they want, because you've got to be able to produce what the customer has described and what you've drawn and what you guys have discussed. But very popular and a huge market for coffee tables. I would say more so than dining tables, only because coffee tables wear out, they go out of fashion, and people will frequently update their coffee table when their furniture changes. A few more to go. Wine racks is the next one. I personally have not gotten into wine racks other than putting metal bottle holders on slabs of wood. But creating box style or diamond shaped or floating shelf type wine racks, I see those all the time. I feel like Etsy and markets are a great way to sell those. It takes a little bit of skill with the joinery and the geometry, but there's a good potential profit in those. So outdoor furniture is another. To me, outdoor furniture is a mixed bag because no matter how good your materials and joinery, putting things outdoors will destroy the furniture. It's just a matter of time. If you've ever driven into the countryside and seen abandoned houses, you can tell that no matter how strong the house, whether it's stone or wood or brick, nature always takes it back. And outdoor furniture is no different. Between the sun and weather, furniture will lose that battle. So it's a little heartbreaking to build something knowing that it's going to perish. It's great to make something beautiful and have somebody use it, but if they don't take care of it, it's not going to last a very long time, and it certainly won't last for generations like indoor furniture can. That being said, creating outdoor tables or Adirondack chairs, not as difficult of a job, so moderate difficulty. The cost can be a little higher because you need to be starting with a species of wood that is tolerant to being outside. I prefer to work in cedar. It's a relatively low cost. It looks great. Therefore, my potential profit margin is much higher. And the last thing, which is something that I haven't done, but creating toys and games. I obviously am always focused on furniture for my own business, and I do a market every few weeks over the summer, and I do think that toys and games like puzzles or a tic-tac-toe board, I do chess tables, but I count those as tables, and they're not $10 tables, but creating a puzzle, almost like even a Jenga tower, which would be super easy, tic-tac-toe games, different things for children, anything that a child is going to say, Mom, buy me this, Grammy, buy me this. Those are easy to sell and probably not that difficult to make. And with the right jigs, you could probably batch those out pretty fast. I'm imagining a Jenga tower made out of exotic woods. The cost might be a little high, but it would be beautiful, right? To have, a Jenga tower full of walnut and ash and maple, but then also tiger wood and purple heart, bacote, just tons of character in the wood. I think that would be a really fun project. So they're toys, so they can't be $200. So maybe the profit margin isn't as high. So sell a lot of them. Just to recap the list, just going to run through it real quick. So the suggestions are cutting boards, picture frames, floating shelves, coasters, jewelry boxes, wall art or signs, coffee tables, wine racks, outdoor furniture, and lastly was toys and games. Hopefully this list inspires you to create a few things, and maybe it sends you off in a whole new direction. Either way, this was a short list just to get you thinking about what you could be doing while you are solo in the shop. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to reach out to me at solointheshop@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you got value from it and would like to help the show grow, I'd appreciate a review wherever you listen. Be sure to check the show notes for links to my socials or any extra stuff we discussed today. Until next time, stay safe in your shop, and we'll talk again soon.